everybody, welcome this afternoon to the Dementia Caring and Coping series. Thank you so much to the City of Roseville for always having these series here, and they're recording this one today. So we're still wanting participation, of course, but if you're shy, I'm very loud, and I'll come out and repeat whatever you're saying or just speak on your behalf. I'm very happy to announce that we have Lori LeBay here. She is the proud owner of Alzheimer Speaks. She cared for her mother with dementia for over 30 years, and that gave her a lot of tools to say, let's get this dementia shifting from crisis to comfort. She also created Dementia Map, which is a website that's like a one-stop for everything dementia. It's amazing, and a long dream of hers, and I'm very happy that she has that going. And she's the author of Betty the Bald Chicken. And if you have not read that book, you should. And if you have children in your life, you should share it with them, but adults can learn from it too. So the very talented Lori LeBay, thank you.
I'm excited to be here. I have to fess up, we were going to do a PowerPoint and I put the wrong flash drive in my purse, which is kind of hilarious because I was thinking I really want this to be interactive. I don't really know if I need the PowerPoint. I guess God took that over for me. It's going to be very interactive. So the goal today is really to talk about denial and dive deep into it, because it's really easy to say somebody is in denial, and it's really even easier to be frustrated by that person who's in denial. And I want to be able to look at it from a broader set. So what do you think denial means? Anybody want to answer that? What's your definition of denial?
Accepting.
Not accepting.
It's not happy.
Not happy. Those are both great answers. Go ahead.
Thinking nothing's wrong.
Thinking nothing is wrong. Life is beautiful.
Overwhelming.
Overwhelming. Great answer. You can kind of see the two sides to that. One was defining and then one was the feelings. And it's usually the feelings that take over with denial. And I think what we're going to find is denial is driven by our feelings and our beliefs. But we usually don't look at it like that. We just look at it like, you're irritating me, come on, get with the program here, I need help. You know, why aren't you helping? Why don't you see what I'm seeing? And really, when we're caregivers, care partners, care companions, whatever you want to call us, we're like police officers. They don't get the same story from anybody when they ask to define a situation. And we're going to find that out today as well. Denial is going to look different for every single one of us, and there's going to be a lot of different situations, and we're going to look and go, wow, there's a lot of people in this circle of care, and ones that I didn't even think were part of the circle of care that affect denial, and it affects the way that we care. So how many people here have actually witnessed somebody in denial? Okay, I want to hear everybody's story because this is how we learn the best. And through storytelling, through real life situations. Because I promise you, you're not alone in what you're witnessing. So, do you mind sharing? You had your hand up? And if you can speak up, or if you can stand up, it'll pick up by the microphones a little bit better, because we're going to be sharing this with the world, because this is a hot topic.
I don't want to be on the camera. I'm care partner to my long time friend who currently is living with me, and who was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment 2.5 years ago. As recently as last night, she went all the way through how this isn't impacting her at all, and there's nothing wrong, and she's always been like this because she's had testing, and that's why she can't coordinate, that's why she's forgetting, that's why she, all this kind of stuff. And it's hard, it's really hard, because she takes on tasks. In her life, she is a psychotherapist. She will not give up that practice. And it's because that's who she is in her mind. It's who she was. So it's put her in a dire financial situation and all sorts of things that stem from not being able to say, I retire, I'm gonna retire. She won't do it. She's gonna be 75 in November. And I'm kind of at a loss as to what to do, because even though we've been through 2 neuropsych exams, we've been seen by neurologists, etc., there is a definitive decline. It's primarily frontal lobe involvement, so if you know anything about the brain, it is her ability to get from point A to point B. It's her ability to manage her emotions and follow through. It's just simply not there. But
Yeah.
she doesn't think that's true.
She doesn't see that, so she's blaming other medical issues,
Yeah.
but she's also wanting to live the life of who she's always been, a psychotherapist, and not letting go.
Yeah.
And that's difficult for anybody, dementia or not. We need to have purpose in our lives. So thank you for sharing that. How about you? Any examples of witnessing somebody in denial? It doesn't have to be the person with dementia. It can be a child, it can be yourself, it can be a neighbor, it can be anybody.
Well, it's my cousin, my first cousin. She was diagnosed with MCI, but she is denying it. Except she still keeps saying, well, my memory isn't like it used to be. And then she'll repeat things over and over that she doesn't remember she has already said. And I keep telling her, I gave her the name of a good neurologist. I think her family is denying it more than she is, in fact. She considers me kind of a sounding board, I guess. We get together about once a week, and she goes over the same things, goes back in time and tells the same stories. And her family doesn't interact like that with her, they just have a good time and laugh, and so they don't realize that this is happening to her.
That is like head on for so many situations. So that comment of, it's not what it used to be, my memory or, my abilities. And so we push it off to normal aging. This is just what happens because it's a softer cell. But then when you don't have family and others supporting you, then it's really easy to stay on that path because no one's opening up the door for any alternatives for that, which all of this stuff is going to come into play. Is there something you'd like to share? Anybody that you know that you've seen living in denial?
Don't talk about me.
My brother and I are working with our older sister, and then she's been diagnosed with the same, probably diagnosis, mild cognitive. She did not do all the neurodiagnostic testing because she's never tested well. She gets all upset. She has significant anxiety and depression and ADD that have gone with her through her life. So she
been married.
But my name is Mary. Yeah. So and I think, what do you think, Terry? I think that she's starting to accept now. She says that I have dementia, so she's saying that. She has auditory hallucinations about. She lives in a condo that she hears these people at night, and first of all, they were fighting amongst themselves, and now they're talking about how they're mad at her, and Nancy this and Nancy that, and we're going to deal with Nancy, and they're going to come to her door. She thinks they're going to come to her door and ask her to come and meet with them, and so it's so sad for me and frightening that she's dealing with this. She's afraid every day. And she doesn't understand why the people in her building, she's a total rule follower. So she's never broken a condo association rule anywhere, anytime. And I said, well, Nancy, what could they possibly be upset with you about? She thinks that they believe she called the police to complain about these people who are arguing all the time, who really aren't arguing all the time. She's just hearing this. So anyway, that's in a nutshell. Anything else, Terry, specific?
That's pretty good.
So we just want to figure out what the best course we can to support her and keep her safe. So she just fell at home on Saturday. We spent the day in Regents ED. She, her physicians, the specialist in cognitive decline, and her primary care physician says that the worst thing we can do for her, her biggest risk because of her dementia, is for her to live alone. He's repeated that many times. He says, you think you're doing her a favor, that is her biggest risk, to live alone. So we are trying to escalate our response a little bit and get her into assisted living memory care, somewhere where we can have some peace of mind that she's not alone, and that if she falls and doesn't want to wear her medallion that I got her with GPS, and the people at the space station could pick her up somewhere. But she doesn't want to wear it because it's not a high fashion statement, etc. So I don't want her to fall and be alone.
Yeah.
So.
And part of, what you're going through, with those audio hallucinations can be really, really challenging. And sometimes medications can help with that, and sometimes they can't. But where I think it gets dangerous too is when you're living alone, and when she's got high anxiety to begin with, it just increases in that fear and that panic. And that's not good. And so getting her in a community would be helpful and would be a safety issue, not only for the falls, but to try to monitor how often is that really happening. Because I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of people, dementia or not, where they just grab a hold of one thing and boy, they just spin on it and it just keeps escalating.
Yeah.
And you don't want that to happen, and in a community, there could be some diversion tactics in terms of keeping her busy and things like that.
Right.
And stuff. So thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Could you use the black marker?
Oh, sure. I can see the black one, I didn't think wrote as good, but that's okay. How about you, sir?
I've dealt with it more from a professional level.
Mm-hmm.
Worked as an investigator with the Board of Medical Practice.
Okay.
A lot of healthcare professionals who are in denial, both for chemical dependency and other health issues and Alzheimer's. And it was one where they're very good, skilled in terms of what they can try and say, how they're not denying it.
Mm-hmm.
That language of not denial, that, well, it's only this or it's only that. However, they can't deal with the combination of it.
Okay, so you're dealing, just so I'm clear in my head, you're dealing with professionals in denial of their own situation.
Well, we get a report about they're having these issues regarding their practice.
Mm-hmm.
And then we find out it's related to chemical dependency.
Yep.
Or then we find out, wait a minute, it's mental illness or in some cases Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
We do have other programs that we can refer them to. And if they go into those programs voluntarily, then as long as they stick with the program, then things are okay. Because sometimes they can be monitored in practice. Mm-hmm. In other situations, it's one they have to surrender their license.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one getting them to that point. But I mean, the most fun ones I think I had were the psychiatrists. Because they could talk your mind game like you would believe.
Maybe you should take on that second hand. Just saying.
I should put them together, then they could work out their problems.
It is funny how people learn to manipulate the system though, but when you think of it, all of us manipulate the system to feel comfortable all of our lives. We're adjusting and we're flexible, so we're no different. It just happens to get escalated and more concerning and dangerous at this level. and can affect a lot of other people. So thank God for investigators, but each one of you is an investigator as well in terms of being able to look at these situations and see where they're at. How about you two in the back?
Well, my situation was, I'm just,
Can you speak a little bit louder?
I'm just kind of speaking, for a memory care facility.
Okay.
I worked at the front desk
Mm-hmm.
and, I would fob people down to the facility, and from the minute you'd get on the elevator, it was strong urine smell.
Mm-hmm.
And had so many families report this. And as you walked through the facility, it was really strong. And I reported this numerous times to management, to corporate. Nobody did anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, I filed a claim with the state of Minnesota, and they basically said there's nothing to justify. But it's so sad when you go into some of these facilities and you think that your loved ones are properly cared for, and they're not.
Okay.
But I'm partly here for myself too, just to learn more and as you work with people. But it's really sad when no one cares.
So your situation is a company is in denial of how their service is coming off. It's like, hello, breathe. You can smell it, we can all smell it. But again, think of this. How many times, and I'm just gonna play devil's advocate because this is where it gets confusing. How many times have you had a pet, or you've walked into someone's house and you go, ooh, they got cats, they got dogs. They don't smell it at all because they're used to it. And so again, not an excuse, but just a perception that has to be taken into the equation with that. And that can happen a lot. But you would think if someone new is stepping in, their sniffer would work. But maybe they've been affected by COVID.
Families are commenting, 4 families in 2 days.
Yeah.
Just stepping on the elevator,
Yeah.
let alone going in.
And things like that, I think, your group of people might want to hit up an ombudsman person and say, this isn't just me. This is a group of people, and we're concerned about this. And is it affecting people physically? That's not good to be inhaling. But are their bottoms getting raw? Is dirty linens and stuff just hanging out? At what level is the depth of this? And that is one of the, I think back to when I was 13 years old, and my great aunt was in a nursing home. And I loved my great aunt, and she had memory issues, but of course back then it was hardening of the arteries. And I walked in with my mom and my brother, my mom dragged my brother to come along, and she didn't remember me at all. But she remembered my little brother. And I was so offended. I'm like, he didn't even want to show up. Here I am. But I remember always going in there having that image of dark, dingy, people in wheelchairs bumping into one another, no communication, and a strong presence of urine. And that's hard to overcome, and it's hard to fight. But if you have to get that documentation in repeatedly and from different sources, I think will help with that. And ombudsmen, they are fantastic at negotiating things out with communities. How about you?
So I have an aunt who has severe dementia, end of life, I'm sure, in bed and can't move anymore. But she regressed from someone who would read several books a day to can't even write her own name. And then I have an uncle, my mom's brother, who has had dementia for years, and you talk to him and, oh, I can't remember that, oh, I can't remember that. And then last November, my father-in-law had an episode, kidney failure, and his dementia went from not great, like still driving, but until, you know, he put gas in the diesel. And so there was kind of that, but then he can't recognize me anymore. And so my denial is my mom, because it's not that bad. And it's been getting worse. She's been telling the same stories over and over, especially since 2020, living alone, and a strong woman. She's been a widow since she was 42, raised 8 kids by herself, the youngest, who was 2 at that time, and she is now 84, and the excuses were, well, she can't hear, she needs new hearing aids. Oh, she can't see, wait till she gets her cataract surgery. And then it was, oh my God, she can't remember that a couple days ago she went and saw our 8th grade teacher in hospice. Until we give her a detail, and then she can fill in the rest of the details. And it's me and my siblings who have been just, it's not that bad, because it's not as bad as, and we have these reasons. And Mom's been really good at covering it up.
Oh, they're exceptionally good at covering it up.
And we were all too willing to believe.
Yeah.
You know, okay, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. So.
When I sold real estate, I dealt with a lot of seniors. That was my niche. And I had this thing in my head that my parents were going to be okay because they were 10 years younger than that hitting. And every year it moved out 10 years. And then one day, boom, can't use that anymore. But it's really easy to believe it's the hearing, it's the eyesight, because you go to the doctor and that's what they're telling you. You know, they're starting at the basics. They need to wean things out. Is this depression? Is this that? So we've been kind of trained to do that. But part of what we're going to look at is, why do we really, really do that a little bit later. So thank you. Those were great examples. How about you? Have you experienced somebody with dementia? Or in denial at all? Dementia or not, there's no difference really.
20 years ago, when there was no support, no education, my mother was diagnosed with a terminal illness. And it was the dementia and the denial of her illness that was just a combination that I really didn't have anyone to turn to. And I know she needed to be in hospital. I needed her to be in hospice because I had been caring for her. And that combination was just overwhelming and I don't think there was any way that anyone was going to convince her that she had dementia or that she was dying. Mm-hmm. So it was, and I'm so happy for what's happened in all these years since. And thank you, people back there who are doing this.
Yeah, it's hard when you just feel at a loss, and even when you first get diagnosed, you're in that spot because you don't even know stuff like this exists because nobody tells you. Most of the doctors aren't connecting you to any of this stuff that is out there, and it's critical to hear one another's stories because one, it gives us a calm and a peacefulness of, oh, I'm not alone at least. At least there's somebody out there that understands what I'm talking about. Because a lot of times we talk with other family members or friends, and these kind of brush you off, you know, like it's not a big deal. I got to the point with some friends with my parents. My dad had brain cancer, my mom had dementia. And after my dad died, I actually had friends, all of them, which I thought were very good friends, but they had very different approaches to me in dealing with my mom's dementia. And they would all ask, how's she doing? But they asked for 2 totally different reasons. One would ask because they really wanted to know, how was my mom doing? How was I doing? And how could they support? And the other one said, you know, you don't need to see her anymore. You can just place her, you don't have to visit. And that was all, it was giving me permission to just walk away because of their discomfort with the topic. And that really, really needs to change. And we've seen some, but I still think a long, long ways to go to spread that message. But it really gets into emotional comfort, why people are in denial and, you know, why they don't want to deal with it, many, many times. So, and I think it was good that you said I needed her in hospice, because you have to take care of yourself as well. You have to be able to come back to the root of who you are and what your relationship is with people, and you have to allow others to come in and help. Because this is not a job of one. This is not a disease of one. We're told it is by the insurance companies, but the ripple effect is far and wide. This is a community disease, and we need community support on that level. How about you two? Have you guys witnessed anybody in denial?
Do you want to start or should I? My dad went through one of those, and I was there for her as often as I could do. And when she passed, it was sad, obviously. When I went to my doctor after that, I said, you know, should I be looking for something for that happening or not, or you know, maybe I'm okay. And as it went further along, I just could see a lot of the things that I had seen with her. Recently, my mother, didn't I say that? Sorry. See, that's one of the problems right there. But, so when it did get bad enough, I couldn't even work anymore. I couldn't type anything. Take me like an hour to do a few sentences. So we found out what it was. It was aphasia.
Can you speak up a little?
I'm trying.
Okay.
So, I forget where I'm at here.
So you found out it was aphasia for yourself. You were having concerns with yourself after placing his mom, seeing signs and things.
And I kind of looked at it as I can either sit in the corner and not do anything and ignore it, or I can say, I've got a lot of time to go yet. So, and I have a wonderful wife. Friends, I have lots of friends. I talk to them all the time now. I used to talk, you know, here and there. See, I get lost here. My family, they were there for us. And I'm active. I mean, I'm moving around. I can still drive. Soon, maybe not, I don't know. But able to do that. I play golf in that season, and bowling, and pool, and I have 4 pinball machines to play with.
Wow. So he's found out he's dealing with it, but instead of being in denial, you're stepping into it, you're stepping up, and you're saying, I'm still gonna claim my life. And I'm gonna live my life, so good for you. There are lots of wonderful organizations, I'm sure you tapped in. I can see Carolyn's head going with Lynn Bloomston back there, but there's like Dementia Action Alliance. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They are an online group. They have all kinds of support for people living with dementia. They do their own radio show. They have art programs. They have memory cafes. They have a speakers bureau. So companies are starting to hire people like you living with dementia to get out and share. So that's really cool that, you know, your belief system, your history allowed you to look at that in a realistic light.
And I just found out recently that yesterday we went to it's not a doctor, but sees how you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Speech therapist.
Thank you.
What was that?
It was a speech
A
therapist.
speech therapist for the aphasia,
And
okay.
he said it's not progressing all that bad, a little bit, but it's doing well. And then I asked the question, as this goes along, and I won't be able to talk anymore, should I try to get, what do you call it, signs stuff?
Sign language?
Thank you. And he went, that's a great question.
There's a gal, Lori Shearer, who's been living with dementia quite a while, and that was one of her strategies. And they actually through Dementia Action Alliance, they've done a couple of classes on sign language. So and I don't know what they are, but gotta go to the bathroom, need a drink of water, what are we gonna call? All of those types of things, because she wanted to, continue to communicate and look at things in different ways. There's equipment, there's a linograph or something like that, I'm probably calling it the wrong thing, that people use that's a computer. But it's a beautiful thing to do in terms of being a leader, and having the support to because you're educating everyone else to volunteers and volunteers. So I do a thing called Dementia Chats. And typically we get together once a month and I interview people with dementia. You'd be more than welcome to be part of that group. We do it on Zoom. And we have people from all around the world. And we had one gal who had aphasia. And she would mumble and jumble her words, but we always just let one person talk ahead of time. We always knew what Susan was saying. It's kind of like when letters are mixed up, but you still know the words. When you pay attention, we can still communicate. And she was just a hoot. She was very active and like yourself, but she, even as it progressed, she was still part of the group. People wrapped their arms around her, they loved her, and that wasn't going to get in the way of their relationship. Now, not everybody can do that, but it taught all of us so many different things. It's kind of like with dementia, a lot of times, we'll be communicating with someone with dementia. And we'll let's say they're over here, and we're like, grab your jacket, let's go. And they're like, what'd you say? Because one, they can't hear because we're not face to face, and they're not able to read all of our facial expressions. And so it's really important that we learn to use our multisensory gifts of communicating and be more sensitive. And that allows us to keep those communication wires going, which helps us avoid being in denial, avoids that scary piece. So thank you so much for sharing. How about you?
I was in denial.
A caregiver in denial? Who's ever heard of such a thing?
And admitting it.
I thought he was just, was having anxiety attacks or something.
Uh-huh.
Because I'm like, he's too young. He's
Yep.
too young to have
Yep.
dementia.
Yep.
And then we just started going to the doctor, and then when it hits you, it's like, oh my goodness sakes. Because you think you have all this time in the world, and once you retire, you're going to do all this fun stuff. And then it's like, whoa, baby, what do you mean you're quitting your job? So, it's been an adventure for both of us.
It has, and it's not been easy. We've worked through it most of the time. A few times maybe not.
Well, eventually you got there, you showed up together, so I would give it that you worked through it. But yeah, you're gonna have those bumps, but you had those bumps before dementia ever walked into your life. And that's something that we don't always appreciate, this is just another thing that we have to cope with. This is another thing that we have to figure out, how can we be fluid? How can we address this together to continue our lives? How do we be creative? Losing an income's not an easy one to tackle, for sure. With that, even though, you can say, oh, the government, you can sign up for this. Well, that's a process in and of itself and can be costly and frustrating and adding on to angst because that doesn't always go smoothly and easily. And sometimes with age, they're like, no, you don't qualify for that, you know? And so people can really spin with all of those things. So it's important for us to recognize denial happens in all different scenarios. How about you, sir? Have you ever witnessed somebody in denial or yourself in denial?
Well, you people haven't added anything new.
Okay.
It's I'm in denial. I'm not in denial. I'm negative.
You're negative.
My wife is in denial. She's positive.
Okay.
And it's always, you're always looking on the dark side of things.
Okay. So your wife's living with dementia?
We can call it mild cognitive
Okay.
impairment at this
Mild
stage.
cognitive impairment. Okay.
My personal discouragement with this whole subject is how slow some of this moves. And when I thought, well, you know, it can't last too long. And what did you say, 30 years?
30 years.
And her brothers had it. 8 of 17 cousins have it on both sides of the family. And there's not much room for denial.
Yep. Yeah. 8 out of 17 in the family. And yet they say, you know, the family history isn't a big thing. It's because it hasn't been studied and they haven't been asking the questions, because I hear that a lot. And yet there are things that we can do with lifestyle, acceptance, purpose. I think my mom lived as long as she did because she felt included. She felt purposeful. She felt engaged. She didn't feel abandoned. Though there were people who did definitely, you know, walk away from the situation. And mild cognitive impairment is one of those tricky labels because a person with dementia, once they've accepted the disease, like a lot of people got diagnosed with Alzheimer's and then they decided to change the insurance qualifications and then they said, no, you don't have Alzheimer's, you have mild cognitive impairment. And they're like, there's nothing mild about this. That is a bad term. This is dysfunctional. This is disruptive. And so sometimes our word choices really add to the anger and the frustration of what could really happen. Or even being told a diagnosis can change. Most of us are never told that. And some people end up with 2 or 3 different diagnoses. When my mom died, we did an autopsy. And she had Alzheimer's, she had Lewy body, and she had Parkinson's. Lewy body and Parkinson's were never, ever mentioned. And Dr. Fry, who's here with Health Partners, who has been around forever, I had him kind of sit down with me and go over the autopsy. And he kind of let out almost a squeak like, ah! And he's like, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have reacted to this like this. And he's like, but Lori, I've never seen a brain this atrophied. But this is what we should expect. You've been telling us for 30 years that she has been living with this. But for the first 10, she was told it was menopause. And she just kept saying this, like, my girlfriend's menopause, doc, but she wasn't getting anywhere. But, mom's been gone 10 years, and then you add another 30 on top of that. Things have changed, but still not enough. So we have to really be advocates of this. I don't know if she would ever be open to going to like a memory cafe where people with dementia.
Well, now, that's foolish. She's never had a bad memory, or a good memory.
Yep.
Who said that? My memory is never good.
Yep. And that's a very common thing we hear from caregivers. You would be a perfect fit in my Shoreview group. We meet the last Wednesday of every month, and we have a lot of caregivers, and we meet alone in that group, and then you can bring your loved one if you want to have respite care as well on that. But just hearing other people's stories sometimes help take that loneliness out and that kind of abandonment where you're like, why am I doing this all by myself?
We have health partners.
Mm-hmm.
We've been pleased with health partners for every doctor I think we've had, except 1 or 2.
Uh-huh.
Now, what is their neuropsychologist, I believe was the term. You've got mild cognitive impairment, we'll see you in a year.
Mm-hmm.
And what a help.
Yep. Yeah, we really
We
need,
fight these battles and we don't know how to fight them.
yeah, and we really need to get more information to the doctors and to get disseminated for sure. I'm gonna go on to you two back here. Have you guys experienced anybody?
Yeah, my husband is 78. He passes all the memory tests in the doctor's office,
Okay,
but everyone knows there's something wrong with him. He loves doing the dishes and unloading the dishwasher and cleaning the house. And when he unloads the dishwasher, I find stuff that, like, I'll find a pie plate in with the plates
Mhm.
and things like that. And I don't ever correct him. I just put it in the right place because I'm not gonna fight with him. And but it's like we'll be going to a soccer game for one of our grandkids, and he'll say, "Now, are we going to Two Rivers?" I go, "No, honey, it's the River Falls one." But he knows it. I have to tell him like 100 times. So I don't know if he's not bad enough to be in denial, or I talked to his doctor about it, and his doctor said as long as he passed this memory test, we're all good. But he told me when he took the 3-word test, he got the first word, and the second word, the person who was giving him the test kept rapping on the desk. He goes, "Desk?" You think?
Oh my.
I know. So for me, it's more, I just want to hear what other people are saying. 'Cause I know something's wrong, but he doesn't. And my kids know, and our grandkids know, but
He won't acknowledge.
and there are some other tests they can do, you know, there's a blood test out, and there's a spinal tap, there's a PET scan, but again, it's sometimes when everyone thinks everything's fine, it's hard to get them to go to the doctor. That's the number one thing, is they won't go to the doctor. And so,
It's hard to get the insurance.
yep, because you need a referral, and it's hard to get in. You know, appointments are pushed out so far as
I
well.
think we waited 8 months to get it on the first or second exam.
Yep.
8 months.
And that I think is horrible, but when I was talking to somebody in Canada, they said 6 years. 6 years for them to, well, how much things changed by then. Then I talked to somebody in Scotland, and they said once somebody calls in for an appointment, they have somebody who meets with them immediately before they even meet with the doctor, to get them into the system, to get them into the support. So and they go to their house, they come to them. And so it really takes the scary out. So we have a lot to learn in this whole business. Amy, I'm gonna pass you, and I'm gonna go to the woman next to you.
Mine is with my husband, and he's always had anger issues, and that has increased dramatically, especially towards me. When he was starting in his decline, he felt he had bitterness and resentment towards me. And there is times when I feel like there's more than that. It's almost hatred. And he likes to be in control, always has liked to be in control. He wanted to be the leader. And he's in a facility, well, he's actually in Amy's, on Amy's floor when she was there. And he would hit, kick, bite the staff if he did not want to do what they asked him to do. And he would tear off the diapers. I mean, he was aggressive. And so they've increased his medicine now, and he's much more mellow and much more cooperative. But I do notice that the staff is, they're cautious with him. And
Rightfully so.
rightfully so. And he, if I say, can I wipe off your hand because it's sticky? No. So, I mean, he will not, but my son is like the knight in shining armor, and he will do anything my son asks him to do.
Isn't that funny, how they still remember some of those connections, and it really
But
changes?
the problem with that is my son is very busy at work, and he has 4 teenage children. And so
Time
he
is
only
limited.
has so
yeah.
much time.
Yeah,
So I'm more the one that has to deal with them. And so I go about every 2 to 3 days. I do not go because some days are really kind of a downer, or well, they are a downer. I get depressed at times, and it's like.
well, I'm glad you're taking care of yourself though, because
Yes.
a lot of times, we don't take care of ourselves and we keep pushing forward, and that's not healthy. And when our angst is showing, they'll mirror that back and it can multiply things. I was thinking just even with your husband when you said it's, sometimes their hands get sticky when they eat. Sometimes it's taking that washcloth or that rag and wiping your own hands down and going, gosh, my hands are sticky. Do you need one too?
Oh,
So
okay.
it's not a, you're being a slob type thing, you need help. It's, this is happening to me too, and you're making it a we instead of a them thing.
That's why I come to these groups
Mhm.
and go to a support group, because just these little tidbits
Yeah.
really help because it's so easy to fall back to the old ways of talking and thinking, and I cannot do that.
Yeah.
Because I will just make him angry.
Yeah. And it's they say as we age, our characteristics get stronger with or without dementia. So if you're an angry, bitter person, you're probably going to get angrier and more bitter, as you age. If you're happy, you'll probably be, more happy. But again, it depends on if you get a certain type of dementia. We can have somebody who's been evil, nasty all their life, and the kids don't want to be with them. They're divorced, the whole 9 yards, and then they're like, who's this person? I like this person, or vice versa. So there's just so much to learn, but we learn by sharing our story. So thank you with that. How about you?
Well, I could talk all afternoon. My husband had Parkinson's with cognitive decline, and my mother had fairly advanced difficulties. And I guess the one common denominator that I was involved in was their driver's licenses, and I'm sure that there are many people here who have dealt with that. And how many times did I hear there's nothing wrong with my driving? We're perfectly fine. You can't do this to us, because I basically had my mother's license taken away and my husband's license taken away because they were a danger on the road.
Yeah.
And I felt that, if they want to do things in their homes that's going to endanger themselves, that's one thing. But when you are endangering other people, I just couldn't go along with that. But I had lots of fear, great anger directed at me during those periods of time.
Yeah. One of the things I'll mention, driving is a really huge one. And one of the things that we talked about on dementia chats, where I facilitate a conversation with people living with dementia, they talked about that, in the earlier stages. Many of them wrote letters to their family saying, if this becomes an issue, I want you to know it's okay to pull my license. Some of them did videos, and to be able to talk with family to try to alleviate the guilt. And they all admitted, I might not remember writing that. I might accuse you that, that's false, that's not me. That's why some of them went to the videos, but they may not recognize themselves in the video either. But they really wanted to define what was safe. And for many of them, what they came up with was, if I don't feel safe driving my grandchildren, take my license. Because they all seem to have this line of somebody who was really important to them that they wouldn't want to harm. And again, a lot of us don't like driving anymore because there's so many wackadoos on the road. Nobody seems to follow the rules anymore. They're texting or they're talking or they're doing whatever. And so, you really have to have those escalated, ears and eyes on, even with a car that beeps and brakes and does all of those things. That can still be really confusing for a person with dementia as well, learning that new technology. I had one gentleman who, he said, we're going to go out and buy a new car with all that technology because I want to drive as long as I can. So earlier on, they set that up for him to be able to learn, to be able to hold on, but it's a tough discussion. I had a girlfriend whose dad drove into the neighbor's fence and drove into his own porch once. Not an issue, it was the brakes, it was this, it was always something.
Something else.
Yeah, and so, thank you for being brave and sharing that.
The one interesting thing about it was, it had been my father who was pushing my mother to drive because he had macular degeneration and he got to the point where he just couldn't see. And there was a lot of crying, there was a lot of yelling at me over this issue. 2 weeks later, I got a note from my mother that said, "Thank you for doing what you did. I really did not want to drive."
Yeah. Well, it's like, why didn't you tell me that sooner?
Well, it was my father who was really pushing everything.
Yeah,
So.
and it's hard. Those relationships run really deep. How about you in the purple?
My 50 years worth of stories. Starting with my grandfather. Two that have jumped out or have stuck with me. One was walking around the block with my father, who was mid-stage with dementia. And he and my mom had just come back from visiting his sister. And I turned to him and I said, "It's too bad about Mimi." And my father said, "Why? What's wrong with Mimi?" And I said, "Well, Mom said that Mimi has dementia, the Bennett curse."
Mm-hmm.
My father looked at me and said, "Sure glad I don't have that."
Oh, yeah.
And then this summer I was out visiting his youngest brother, who is in his late 70s. And my uncle said, "Yeah, I've totally escaped that. Dementia has not visited me at all, and I'm in great mental health." And his wife is on the other side of the patio table, leaning and talking to my wife about how she sees that his evidence of cognitive impairment has really ramped up in the last 3 months, and she's really, really, really worried about him. And he won't acknowledge.
Okay, thank you.
So denial is...
Denial lives on strong.
Well, I've run a caregiver support group for 15 years, and everybody who comes in who's a caregiver has much of these stories.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really do have a lot of commonalities.
We are not alone.
Yeah, and we learn from one another through the sharing. One of the things that I liked when you said, your dad said, "Well, I'm glad I don't have that," and he kept walking, and it's like, you have to be able to see the humor in some of this stuff sometimes, or you're gonna just break into. And so sometimes it's good to just jot those things down, where you can, you might not be able to laugh in the moment, and you're not laughing at them, you're just laughing at how ironic the situation is. Because laughter to me is one of the glues of our relationships. And so often we give that over. We think we can't laugh anymore because this is serious. This is so serious. We shouldn't laugh. But laughter it breaks the tension. It brings us back into balance again. And it says, that was kind of funny. I know it's not true, but it's a story you'll remember forever. I have tons of those with my mom, and they are so precious and so special to this point. And she's been gone, like I said, 10 years. So thank you for sharing. How about you?
Professionally, I see a lot of older adults that don't want to go to the doctor, and their caregivers and their family are noticing some things that are going on at a more frequent rate. And so the denial is just there. They don't want to go to the doctor. They want to hang out in bed, which I totally get. You have a lot of chronic pain, and you don't. A lot of my clients, they don't want news that something is going wrong, because every time they go to the doctor, they're being told that something is wrong with their bodily function, and it just kind of
something more.
Exactly, something more, and no one wants to hear that. Yeah. It kind of makes you a little sad. And so that's what I'm seeing with my clients. Personally, my maternal grandparents, both of them, they had they were also experiencing all of these sort of areas of memory loss.
Mhm.
And the adults in my family were denial of it, but they also noticed the things. And I also experienced that, your story also echoed with me, where my grandfather would always tell my grandmother that he couldn't go anywhere. He felt like a prisoner. So that was that's gonna stick with me for a while. And just the impact on what that looks like and how we can figure out different ways as a community to adapt and work with.
Mhm. That embarrassment issue works on both sides. So, for example, my mom, she pulled back from doing things. She didn't drive. She stopped, hanging out with her friends because she was afraid she was going to make a mistake. She was going to embarrass herself. She was going to embarrass my dad because, she knew something was off but couldn't get any answers from the doctor. And then you also have family members sometimes who don't want to go out because they're embarrassed and they don't know how to deal with it and they don't know how their person's going to react. And I'll share a story with my own parents. So they lived up at the lake, and then we had an incident where they had to move back in town during the winter for safety. And so when they were in town, they would get together with their old friends. And they would have a great time. Someone would pick them up and drive. I would always run over. I'd get them dressed. I'd make sure Dad had enough money to pay and blah, 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 blah. And they would come back. They would have a great time. And then one day they came back from a long lunch with their friends, and they're like, we're going to go to Texas for the winter. And I'm thinking, excuse my language, the hell you are, because there's no way you can maneuver travel. There's just no way. And I was so angry at their friends, thinking, why would they even throw that on the table? And then I had to look inwards. It's like, because you've never really told them, Laura, and they show up and they're all groomed and they can do the money thing or throw the credit card out, and they're really good at reminiscing, but they're not so good at getting shaved and dressed and knowing what time it is and being able to do all the executive type functioning things. And so I had to really take a look inward going, guess I can't blame them, all the way. I would have thought they would have picked up on some things. Like one time they picked up my dad, and he didn't have dementia with his brain cancer per se, but apparently he was having an episode. They came to pick him up one time, and he had like a beater undershirt on with his suit coat. No shirts. And they took him to the funeral like that. And I just thought, oh my gosh, and of course my dad is very humorous. And so someone's like, hey Dean, what's up with the outfit? And he's like, new style. That was just my dad, to come over. He didn't really know, but he looked down and then he came up with a line to kind of hide it. So it's really interesting how those denial pieces work in. They're all very, very different. Caroline, is there anything that you wanted to add?
If it's okay with you, there's two things. And that is, as the brain is shrinking, on some of our people, insight is taken away.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore it looks like denial, but they truly have no insight of what's going on with them. The other thing I wanted to add, and it's one of the hardest things we have to work with the families, and that is when the caregiver, person living with them, is very aware, but the children are in serious denial. And insisting that mom or dad not move their person to a care center when they're hanging by a thread.
Yep.
And when they just become incredibly mean instead of supportive to the primary caregiver. And it really becomes super challenging, where you really have to work with the caregivers as if they're the only person you're working with.
Yeah, it can get really toxic.
Yes.
Really toxic. Not when the family is split like that. And thank you for bringing up the insight, because that was one of the questions I was going to pose a little later. But it is really important to understand what is the disease and what is a choice, conscious or not. And loss of insight really is a deterioration of the brain that can't be corrected. Like I would imagine most of us here in this room have been in denial at some point, and then all of a sudden a light bulb's gone off, and we're like, oh, this isn't really quite what I thought, and we're able to change. You know, loss of insight, they're not able to make that change. Sarah, how about you?
Well, a denial story. I have a sister right now who lives long distance, who has been living with fairly serious multiple sclerosis. So that becomes a catch-all explanation for all kinds of things. And it's been obvious for years, and she lives by herself in independent living. And it's been obvious for years from her stories that she's not tracking very well and that things are going down. And she told me a story about a month ago about taking an Uber. She was going off to a singing lesson or something, and she couldn't get into the Uber herself, and she wanted the Uber driver to help her, and he refused. So she evidently launched herself across the back seat of the car, was transported that way, and then couldn't get help getting out, and tells me that she fell underneath the car. And then somebody else at the place she was going to helped her get up. And so she was going to file a complaint against the Uber driver for not helping her. So I tried to talk through this to figure out, you know, some of what the reality was versus what I was being told. And this is somebody who is consistently blaming other people for what's happening. And he is disintegrating physically and mentally. And because she lives at a distance and is still considered a functioning adult, the question becomes, how do you do anything as a long distance? And I'm not her caregiver, I'm just her oldest sister. So that kind of continues. So there is denial, and there's certainly denial on her part. And we have a middle sister who hasn't talked to me since 2002. So I have no idea what she makes out of this, but I tend to doubt that it's a straight line.
Yeah, having those like POA and, you know, all the financial docs and legal docs in place, but when you have somebody in denial, they don't think they need somebody. And so that's something in society that needs to change. You know, we should be getting those papers in place before somebody turns 18 or right at that time, because this is about smart living and being cared for well and being in control of our life. And it really can make a big, big mess and add a lot of stress. So thanks for mentioning that. I'm going to go back to Amy.
Hi, so working in senior care, I definitely have found that there are frequently adult children who are in denial of how much care their parent needs. And just, you know, I always think about there's the care staff who are noticing this person needs more help and they want to provide that help. And when I was hearing that story earlier about the odors, you know, and that kind of stuff at a certain facility, it made me think of the times where, everybody's saying they need help, they need more help, and the family is like, nope, they're fine, and we can stop by once a week. Or a lot of denial about pet care too. Those poor pets. You know, the cat that is getting so fat because it gets fed 25 times a day, or the cat that's not getting enough. You know, or the cat that's really sick and everybody's like, nope, it's fine. A lot of that. But, you know, one of the things I hear in the support group frequently that I have are spouses who find that the friends of their spouse are in denial, and therefore they feel kind of pitted against them, where they're not going to get any support. Why are you looking into services? He doesn't need that. He's just fine. And that's a really lonely place to be that I hear a lot of spouses talk about.
Yeah, and it's so true, because I think everyone here has probably experienced with their person with dementia, even if they're having a rough day, if somebody stops in, boom, boy, they get that burst and they hang in there and they can really show up. And it can be really powerful. Plus, when you're getting together with friends, a lot of times it's a casual, old conversation. There's a lot of reminiscing going on, so it's an easy flow. And people don't point, oh, well, that's not really how that story happened. They tend to let go. My parents was really interesting. They had some friends that were almost afraid of it. I mean, just like if we hang out with them, we might get it. And come to find out later on, one of the husbands had dementia. Later, the wife now has dementia. But the fear was so great, just so great. And I think she might have been seeing some things in her husband. And if she saw him in my mom, and we were speaking dementia or Alzheimer's, then what's she going to do with George over here, you know? And then later when she got it, she's still, to this day, she's in a community, but it's just ripped the family apart because she thinks everything is fine. And she's just so frightened of the disease, you know? And I think so much of it is past experience and the stigmas that have been laid on really, you know, toss and turn with a lot of the stigmas. Doesn't help. I'm going to take a picture of this just so I can, we'll get some of this stuff printed up that you guys said, even though I know it'll be in the video. We'll go ahead and, you know, I have my text turns off, but boy, they are going strong with the debate tonight and sending stuff here, even though it's not supposed to be coming through. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this, and I want to talk a little bit more about, you know, we focused a lot here on people living with dementia. We touched a little bit on families, and we touched a little bit on friends. But I want to talk about you. I want to talk about your denial, because I can't believe at some point in your life you haven't been in denial with a situation. So if people are open to, you know, and we've gone past an hour already, we go till 3. I won't pick on everybody, but I wanted to get everyone involved because I think this is important. But is there anyone willing to share a moment when they were in denial and they realized they were in denial? Because usually when you're in denial, you don't know you're in denial. That is just your reality. But usually there's a trigger point that goes, okay, can't ignore this anymore. And then how did you transition into that? So is there anyone who's willing to share a moment when they were in denial? And it doesn't make any difference if it's dementia related or not, because this all works the same. Where something happened and they're like, okay, I have to look at this different. This isn't working anymore. Is that a hand? Okay. We got a brave soul. Thank you.
Interesting concept. But I think it kind of happened last night.
Okay.
So we'd had this long conversation, very difficult conversation about the job and what she was going to do about it. And she went through this long litany again about how she's fine. She doesn't have this, it's much better. She hasn't forgotten any words, she hasn't got lost anywhere, yada, 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 yada. And it's my ADD, and when I was 8 years old, I fell, you know, my brother pushed me off this thing and I hit my head. And, you know, I've heard that story so many times. I finally was like, maybe I'm imagining all this. Maybe she doesn't have an impairment. Maybe this is just who she is, and, you know, so that's kind of where I was. And it was like, how do I live and just accept wherever she is right now? Because the reality is or my reality is, she doesn't make good decisions. And one of the things, as I heard everybody else talk, one of the things a neuropsychologist told us about a little bit more than a year ago, after her second neuropsych exam, that validated the first one, I asked the question, you know, like, you're calling it MCI, mild cognitive impairment, how do we know when and if it progresses? And her answer was, when she can't live on her own. And I thought to myself, well, that's already happening. You know, she already can't live on her own. But here we are, a year and a half later, and she's going on and on. I said to her last night, where would you be if you weren't here? She said, well, I just live with somebody else. You know, so then I think, am I the one that is blowing this out of proportion? Is she really just normally part of the aging process? And should I let go of this? And that's kind of where I went to bed.
Well, that's a great example. So, you know, we're all talking about people living with dementia and them trying to hold on to control. You know, that's why they're in denial. They want to drive, they want to be who they've always been, do what they've always done. And yet, a lot of times as care partners, we're trying to be in control. And what I found with dementia, it's not about being right or wrong. Right or wrong gets the fists up and just, it gets both of you more angry and more steadfast in your positions. But accepting what is can at least calm you down to, I can't control this.
So here's a little more to the story. She is absolutely set, and nothing I have said or other people have said to her is changing. And she is going to Grand Rapids, Minnesota, a week from Thursday, to do a 3-day, 18-hour presentation on psychodrama, which is
She's presenting?
Yep, what she used to do. She hasn't done it for 10 years. And she used to do it quite well. She is the only trained psychodramatist in the state of Minnesota, so that's where she is. And in spite of all my conversations with her and her former colleagues about, you know, what kind of boundaries and, you know, take somebody with you, you know, blah, 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 she won't. And I'm finally at a point where it's like, she won't let me go with her. You know, she's gonna make that drive by herself. She's gonna be there for 3 days and one on the audience for 3 days. And I'm scared to death that she's not gonna be able to do it. And I'm gonna have to drive up there, scoop her up and bring her back. I tried to talk with her a week and a half ago about, okay, I get it. I know you wanna do this. What's our backup plan? What if something goes wrong? Nothing's gonna go wrong. No. And so then I go, well, maybe nothing will go wrong. Maybe I should just quit worrying about it. But that's impossible.
It's hard to let go, for sure. But sometimes we have to to maintain our own mental health.
And if something horrible goes wrong, then what? You know,
Well, then no matter what happens, you're going to deal with it because you've been there for her, you know, and she's going to be the one that's devastated. And you know, the only thing you can do is hope nobody gets hurt. Is she working? And I don't know if I should ask this with the investigator in the room. Is she still
working on
is she still working under a license?
She is.
Okay.
But that particular psychodrama isn't covered by her license. I mean, she's trained, certified. She has all those certifications.
She's a psychologist?
No, social worker.
Social worker.
What is psychodrama?
Psychodrama is a type of therapeutic intervention that uses a drama. You create a scene.
You act things out.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
And she's still seeing patients.
Yes, and she's connected to HSPS.
But unfortunately, in this field, Lori, forgive me, I'm sorry.
No, go
I should
ahead.
have done this. Unfortunately, in this field, we have got to be okay. I'm sorry, it's not gonna sound very kind, and I'm a very loving person. But sometimes the crisis has to happen in order for the change to happen, whether it be a move to a a more supportive community such as a memory care or something, and it sounds horrific, but we can stand on our head and scream and holler to the family pleading, please, please, please. And we have to come to the point where we say, I've got to just let things fall where it may, because nobody's listening. I'm sorry, it doesn't sound nice, does it?
The other part of that is, as a caregiver or a relative of someone who's going through this, you not only have to come to that realization, but you have to recognize that you are going to pick up the pieces when it happens. No matter what, you just have to recognize that this is gonna come and the catastrophe is gonna happen. And if you love that person, and if you want to take care of them, life ain't fair, you're just gonna have to step in and do what you have to do.
Yeah. So here's my other little inkling worry. What if she pulls this off? Then how many more times do I have to go through this? It's like,
Well, you might be less worried if she pulled it off once the next time, though you're seeing all those signs. But it is one of those things to let go. I'm kind of a type A personality, so when I first started in this, I had plans A through Z. I was going to avoid every flipping disaster possible. And I would sit at my desk and I would okay, for this one, and this is how we're gonna block it, this is how we're gonna detour it, this is where we're gonna go. And what I realized one time was that I was literally trying to control. And when I was trying to control, then I couldn't really be present. And I'm gonna kind of sidetrack a little bit, but I have this thing called tears, fears, and joy. And in this group, out of tears, fears, and joy, what do you want? If you had to pick one of those three, what would it be?
Joy.
Number 3, joy. Okay, you were a little quiet there. You had me a little worried there. It's okay, they're liking the grief and the tears. So the grief I found is all about our losses and what we feel we're losing. And we see tons of loss in dementia as caregivers, but the person themselves is going through the exact same thing as we are. They may not articulate that to us. They may not feel comfortable acknowledging that to us because sometimes they think we don't see it. They don't want us to worry about it. I mean, there's lots of different angles with all of this stuff. And so what I found was when I was grieving loss, it's really easy to swirl down and get depressed. Depression is a huge symptom of dementia, but it is a massive symptom of caregiving as well. And it's something we all deal with in life throughout our lives. It's just how are we going to pull ourselves out of the black hole or avoid even getting into it because you see it coming. You can feel it coming. And so for me, what I finally realized one night was how lucky am I to love this deeply, to hurt this bad, to be this scared for somebody. It's because I love so deeply. And you know what? A lot of people never love that deeply, to be that scared, to grieve that hard, to feel that much. And so when I start swirling down and getting real worried and full of anxiety, it sounds weird, but I kind of pull up my bootstraps and go, how lucky am I? Because we can't have a high without a low. I mean, that's just bottom line. And then when it comes to, worrying about things in the future, which is where you're at right now, again, we can plan and we can make all of these things. And while we're doing that, we really think we're helping. We're helping them. We're making our life easier. So, when crap hits the fan, we're going to be ready and off and running. But bottom line is, when something hits the fan, I don't care if you have 42 plans, you're going to make another one because you're going to have learned different things. Situations are going to be a little bit different. So what I have learned, again, this is just for me personally, is not to think that I can control the future, but to get educated, to stay connected, and to live in flexibility and spontaneity so that I can jump into action and know that I've got the skill set to want to help because I love deeply and I care, and we're going to get through this together. And the third piece was the joy. And this is, I think, so often what we miss in this whole piece, and I think it can work into the whole denial factor as well, is joy can only be found in the moment, and it can only be created in the moment before us. And if we're living in the past and we're swirling in our grief and our loss, or we're projecting into the future and trying to control everything, we are not in the moment. And in the moment is when we keep our connections, when we feel we can be honest with our situations, where we feel comfortable to say things that might be uncomfortable, and we look at our words differently. We go from, that kind of, you need the washcloth to wipe your hands, to, I need it too, a we. And it's a joint venture. And when people don't feel alone, they're much more likely to open up and feel safe and be honest. And we have lived in a society that has judged dementia horribly. It has ignored caregiving for years and years and years and put us in this position of believing we are supposed to do everything alone. Like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you handle that? You should be able to handle that. And that's what a lot of us feel. And so we put up the shield. I know I did it with my own family. One of the things I realized that hurt me in that process, and I know I'm getting a little bit off, but hopefully you'll get some tidbits here. When my dad died, we sat down as a family, and I shared with them that I had gathered some stories about mom and dad, mostly mom, and her dementia. And I said, I'm going to write a book eventually. That one still hasn't crept out of me yet. And I was sharing these stories, and my older brother said to me, well, where'd you get those stories? And I thought, well, what a stupid, asinine question. I was there. What do you think I got these stories? They're about mom and dad. I mean, it was just like, how can you even ask me that? And I thought, oh my gosh, because of their denial, they don't have these stories of living in the moment. And that turned everything, because a lot of times, or I know I didn't look at my brothers always so favorably when they wouldn't come around and they didn't want to step up to the plate. And it's sad to say, now I just feel really sorry for them, that they missed out on so much because they were so scared. And they were scared to feel the change. And change is scary. And I thrive on change. But I mean, I don't want negative change. Nobody wants that, but how do we get comfortable with change? How do we get comfortable with being fluid? How do we get comfortable with not judging and accepting? That really isn't the world we live in, especially today. Things are black and white. It's this or that. You agree with me or you don't. We have to come back to the center, into a sense of community and compassion again. And sometimes that means others have to learn their own lesson, dementia or not. And I know I learned that lesson. I thought I was caregiving for a lot of people in my life. And one night I had an epiphany. And I was exhausted. How many people are exhausted as a caregiver at times? Or as a person living with dementia? I mean, this world is exhausting sometimes. And I went home. I had sent my husband on vacation to go golfing with his buds. And I came home and I looked in the mirror and I could barely see my face. And I leaned into the mirror and all of a sudden I felt like a gun in my hand. We don't own any guns. Not a gun person at all. And I could feel my finger pull the trigger. And as I'm like this far away from the mirror, I can see my eyes go from totally normal to, oops, I don't know how that one happened at all, from totally normal to pitch black. And I can see in the mirror, literally, and I can hear the whoosh of a bullet, like on CSI, you know, when it goes whoosh. And it like popped into this side of my temple. My eyes popped out black, and it came out the other side. I can't explain that. I can't for anything, but I remember walking to my bed and voices in my head were screaming at me going, you have to stop. You have to stop. You are not giving care. You are an enabler because you're trying to fix everybody's stuff and you're allowing them to keep doing that. Everybody has their lessons to learn, and when we're protecting people, they don't learn their lessons, and a lot of times they come back with bigger problems, dementia or not. I went to bed that night, and my head pounded. It was like I had this visualization of like a pinball machine just bouncing off my skull, and it hurt so bad, and these voices just kept screaming in my head. You are not a caregiver. You are an enabler. And I woke up in the morning, and I remember gonna get emotional. This was years ago, too. And the sun was coming through the slats of my blinds, and I just remember waking up, feeling strong, and saying, I am not a caregiver. I'm an enabler, and there is a huge, huge difference. And I picked up the phone and I called family, I called my employees, I called my friends, and I said, I will always be there to help you, always, but I will never put more effort into your life than what you're willing to do. And every time I made that statement, it was like I had armor and it just kept tightening up and tightening up and tightening up, and I felt stronger. And a lot of people dropped out of my life that I really loved and cared for, but I also found that they were there because they were using me, not because they had the depth of the relationship that I did. And so I'm a firm believer that people have to learn their own lessons, dementia or not. You know, alcoholism, drugs, all of those things. We can only do so much to protect people. But if they aren't willing to protect themselves, they're going to find another route. And in that process, it can destroy you. Through that worrying, you know, that worry can do a job on your own personal health. I mean, we've heard the story over and over that caregivers get ill and sometimes pass before the ones they're caring for because of the stress. And so you really do have to protect yourself on that. And it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And you can look at me and go, okay, we've been listening to a crazy lady all this time, you know, who had a nervous breakdown. I look at it as an epiphany. I felt like I had angels around me trying to protect me because it was not getting through to me. And I needed something, I guess, bizarre to hit home with me. And I was in the house all by myself. I couldn't be distracted. And I'm thankful for that moment because it's changed how I lived my life. And I remember when my daughter was 4 one time, I can think of this, a 4-year-old saying to me, because everybody would come for me to fix their problems, and she tugged on me one time. She's like, Mom, not everybody wants to be just like you, you know. And I thought, what a brilliant comment, you know, but we kind of think that we have it figured out. And none of us have it figured out. You know, this is the big lab of life. And I wish we could give you absolutes, but everyone's situation is different. And things like what you're going through, they are scary. And I don't think there's a person in this room who would deny that. But I think everyone in this room is supportive if you make that choice to step back And maybe when she's gone, you connect with some friends, you go out and you find, who are you? Because a lot of times we lose ourselves too with that. So,
Sometimes too, the more we like shift to that, more unfortunately.
Yep.
And they're more determined. It doesn't mean that you feel like she's safe to do this by herself. But when we hear that word can't, it just means, first of all, like a child.
Yep. Yeah, there's a
letter possibly just so she knows you're there to support her no matter what her decision is, as hard as that is to do that.
Yeah. They say the more we persist, the more they resist. You know, and that really does come in true, I think, fashion. There's so much more I want to be able to go over with you guys today. So one of the most important things, we've talked about a lot of different issues that people have gone through, and I'm going to highlight just a few more, just because we've only got about 25 minutes left. But this isn't just family, this isn't just friends, this isn't just people living with dementia. This is doctors and home health care and nurses. You've developed relationships with all of these people. It can be the librarian, the person at the gas station, the bank that is also in denial of what's going on. There have been lawsuits. I had a friend who went through one with her mom who kept writing checks, and she had scammers, and she thought she was investing in them. And at first, they would, she would mail it to them, and then all of a sudden they're coming to her door, and then they're going to the bank with her. And, they sued the bank because they had talked about this issue, and they said, nope, we can't do anything because her name's on the account. And so they ended up having to set up a separate account. Now, you can look at it as denial. You can look at it as a lot of things. When you're a family member and you're angry that your vulnerable adult is not being protected, and those suggestions aren't being brought to you ahead of time, it's really, really frustrating. There can be issues where, with Sarah's sister who flopped into the back of the car, and she's in denial of her situation and then blaming it on the professional. The Uber driver is not trained to do that. You probably need Metro Mobility if that's the situation. But people don't like even the term Metro Mobility. So sometimes it's in the names of what we call things, or the terms that we use that can really trigger people as well. There can be denial at all levels in the family, from spouses to their kids, to, don't forget, the stepchildren, their siblings. A lot of times the siblings are scared to death because if they can have it, I could have it type deal. I'll have to look a little bit deeper, and they don't want to go there. It can be grandchildren at all different levels. What I found, though, is little kids are so inclusive, they don't really care. They just want to play. And so little kids can teach us great lessons of acceptance. When my daughter was 5, she was in kindergarten, and Tom and I went to, her little conference with the teacher. And I'll never forget this till the day I die. And the teacher said, "Your daughter is so special. She's so sweet. She helps out all the other kids." And I said, "Oh, that's so nice." I said, "Why do you say that?" "Well, this one over here, she's kind of slower. She's got some ADHD and some other issues. And Danielle's just always right over there helping her with her homework. And this little boy, he's in a wheelchair, and she runs over to, help him get his books and go out to recess and whatever." And I remember looking at the teacher because she thought she was paying us this huge compliment. And I said, "My daughter is not special. Our daughter is not special." "Oh, yes, she is." I said, "No, you don't understand. She doesn't see any of those things. She just sees another little human being that she wants to interact with. And as we age, we forget that. And we start judging. And so some of the strategies that we can use within ourselves and to help others is to look within. How are we looking at things? And it's really easy to judge, and it's really easy to assess. And I'm not saying any of you are doing that wrong, because the doctors will be the first ones to say, come in with your list. What's going on? What kind of differences are you seeing? But all the differences they're asking us for are negative. What's declined? And then they want to write it all down. Why aren't they asking, what are their abilities? How are you adjusting? Because most of us don't even know we could adjust or how to adjust to the changes. We're saying the wrong things as professionals, as individuals, and we have to raise up what they're still able to do. We see that with art. You know, people are told that they can't learn anything new. That is not true. That is not true. They will learn differently, but they can still learn. I have a thing called Dementia in the Arts, and we interview people all around the world that have dementia. And some people have done art all of their life, and they continue on, but they adapt. You know, they don't use as many lenses when they're taking photos anymore, and they don't need as complicated of a camera. And they're using, a lot of times, their iPhone now. But who isn't? Yeah, you know, a lot of things have changed. They try different modes, and they get creative because they're not worried as much about what anyone else thinks. And what they tell us over and over, especially for those who have never done art before, and it can be a paint by number, it can be clay, it can be singing, it can be drawing, it can be dance. It doesn't make any difference what it is. But when they're doing it, they say when they're in the zone and they're being creative, they're being productive, their symptoms kind of melt away. And a calmness takes over. But again, we've been told they can't do this. Oh no, my mom could never do art. Let them try. And don't just try with one mode, try with various modes. And maybe sit down in the chair next to them and try it with them. Not doing it for them. We're really good at doing it for them. But think about how that would make us feel. If somebody is always doing everything for you, then you feel not valued. You feel not capable. You feel unable. And that only makes sense because we all want to fit in. We all want to have purpose. In fact, Bree Brown said one time, she said, you know, she was doing this study and she said, I wanted to do this study about people fitting in. And she said, what I realized was nobody wants to fit in. Fitting in means you have to show up as someone else. People want to be accepted for who they are and what they're capable of. And they want to be appreciated. And that's a big, big shift because we always talk about fitting in. You know, that's what we do when we're in school and we want to be in with the cool kids and, you know, we fall into the peer pressure, or when we're in work and we want to get a promotion, or in the family you want to show up and maybe you want to outdo your sister-in-law at an event or whatever it might be. We have this keeping up with the Joneses thing. But when we can find purpose, not only for ourselves, but for those living with dementia, we can kind of start to disintegrate some of the stigmas behind dementia that cause denial. I'm going to give you an example of one gentleman. Bill and his wife came to a memory cafe, and for those of you that don't know what a memory cafe is for people living with dementia and their care partners. And I started the first one here in the U.S. in 2013. It was a concept from overseas. And I got a lot of blowback, a lot of pushback. You can't have them in the same room. And I'm like, well, where do you think they are the rest of the day? You know, most of these are spouses. This is ridiculous. We want to have peers. And a daughter called me up and she said, Beth called me up and she said, you know, I think my folks are going to come to your memory cafe tomorrow. I hope that's okay. My dad is in total denial of his dementia, to the point we cannot mention the word dementia, we cannot mention Alzheimer's, we cannot address anything pertaining to this. And my mom is dying. My mom is so frustrated, she's so exhausted, she doesn't know what to do because he's in such denial. And he finally agreed to go to one memory cafe to, you know, give her support and really get her off his back and say that he would try it. So they come to the memory cafe and they seem to have a really good time. I ask on the way out, will they be coming back? And she's like, definitely. And he's like, yeah, I think so. The next day, Beth calls me and she is in tears, and I might get teary-eyed telling this story because to me it's just so powerful. And she said, your memory cafe changed my family's life. I said, Beth, how? She said, we can talk about dementia now. She said, I stopped over the next day to see how things went. And I was just stopping in and I told Mom and Dad that I was going to be meeting with a high school friend who I hadn't seen in like 20, 25 years. And Dad happened to remember this person. So I asked him if he wanted to join us for lunch. And he said yes. She said at lunch, he could not stop talking about the memory cafe and how much fun he had and the cool people that he met. And she said, we can now talk about the journey together. But his stigma, you know, was so strong. I mean, I'm sure he was visualizing what I did when I was 13. People in wheelchairs, drooling, not communicating, strong smell of urine, just very end stages. And he saw people living life, enjoying one another, and the camaraderie that happened. You know, stigma busting to me is one of our biggest, biggest assets in order to get rid of denial. Nobody wants something that's scary. But until we create comfortable environments to have a conversation, I'm so thankful each and every one of you shared a story. Those stories are going to reach so many people, and in this room, I know they've changed minds already because people don't feel so alone. And they shouldn't. This is a disease of society. It's not a disease of one. It's not a disease of one family. So helping raise the voice, helping having the conversations really takes the scary out. Learning how to ask for help from people. So if it's somebody living with dementia who needs a ride, how do they do that? If you're a care partner and need some help, maybe you just want a nap and you want someone to take your loved one to a movie or out to lunch or come and play cards or whatever it might be, just so you can rejuvenate. Or maybe you need to get out with your friends, because a lot of us get drained and we don't even know that we're drained. Another coping mechanism, like I said, is dealing with the grief. Grief is one of those things where we don't acknowledge it with denial. But denial happens because we're scared. Denial doesn't happen when you're happy. Denial happens because something is scaring you that you don't want to accept. You don't want to believe because you don't know what to do. And so to me, one of the biggest things that I've learned on my dementia journey is to honor emotions. Emotions are not good or bad. They just are. And I think as society, we are seeing the damage every single day from the school shootings and the bullying by not giving people permission to express their emotions in a normal, healthy fashion. And people pent that stuff up and they explode. That is not the way the world should spin. We need to understand when someone's depressed. I mean, if you have a chronic illness, dementia or not, who is not going to be depressed? Who is not going to be scared? Who is not going to be angry? Everybody's going to feel those things. And everyone's going to feel them in a different time and fashion. You know, emotions aren't something that are a bed in a bag and you just like shake them up, put them up, and okay, it's all going to be pretty in 5 minutes. You got 5 minutes to feel your anger, to feel your frustration, to feel your scariness, and then you just hop back on the yellow brick road and off we go. That's not how it works. And you're going to be triggered repeatedly by your grief because of how dementia plays out. Little things kind of melt away. It might be math and somebody can't do the checkbook. It might be someone's not remembering a name or a birthday, or it's getting dangerous to drive, or they don't know where they live, or they don't know when you tell them to go to the bathroom where to go. It's up to us who supposedly don't have cognitive impairments to read all of the signals and the clues, not only for people living with dementia who are in denial, but for ourselves and for others. When someone is acting differently, what do we label that? When they act out in a way we don't like, we call it a behavior. Now, is a behavior a compliment? No. Nobody wants to be told that they have a behavior. But it's a reaction, it's a clue to tell us something is wrong. And that could be denial for somebody living with dementia. It could be a care partner, it could be a family member or a friend. It doesn't make any difference. When behaviors change, why is that? And again, as Carolyn said, it could be with dementia or some kind of illness that the brain isn't functioning the way it once was. But we have to figure that out. And we have to give comfort to it. Naomi Feil was a big influencer on dementia years and years ago, and she has since passed. But she developed a program called Validation, which was about meeting somebody where they are in the moment. And that works for all of us, dementia or not. Just where are you? How can I help? I'm a safe space to be able to tell, because when we don't know the truth, when we don't know the feelings, we really can't create a good plan. Does that make sense to people? Because it's not what we do for somebody, it's how we make them feel. And yet, as care partners especially, we have this list of what we have to do. It's our to-do list. And we put that in as our priority. And I did the same thing, with my own mom, and I thought I had things pretty under control. I was fairly educated on what was going on, and then one day I snapped at her really bad. She repeated herself like 45 times in 10 minutes, and I felt horrible. Now, my mom forgot all about it. But I didn't. So I interviewed people all around the world and I asked them, what do you want your person to know? And for staff, it was, we're here to support you. For families, it was typically, I want them to know I love you. And what I found was our words aren't enough, especially when dementia comes into play. We have to use our multi-sensory engagement. It's our tone of voice, it's our approach, it's our touch, it's our consistency, saying, we're here for you. I asked people another question, and that was, how do they, what do they have to do when they're caring for somebody? And staff typically said, well, I have a job description. And family members said, I have a to-do list. And I remember going, yes, I print mine out every night, I'm on track. And I kind of let that go. And about 3 months later, I woke up out of a dead sleep in a sweat, thinking, how did I miss this when I interviewed people all around the world? And what I missed wasn't a word, but it was a twang in the voice that says what most of us aren't willing to say out loud. And that is, this isn't how I pictured my life. I didn't expect to lose my job or my husband to lose his job and us to be on this journey. I didn't expect that my friend or partner was going to be in denial and push back and not let me in to help and support when I'm trying so hard. And so I had to look deeper and say, okay, I still have to get my list done. I still want to care for this person, but it can't be my primary focus. And that was really hard to let go of because my to-do list was my everything. It kept me on track. And, as a type A personality, I mean, that's like the cat's meow, my little checklist. And I had to go basically back to the base of Maslow's theory and say, what is important in life? Was my mom safe? Was she happy? Was she pain-free? And it got me back into being in a relationship because a lot of times, and we don't even know we're doing this, but we take ourselves out of our relationship and we step into a whole nother role. And they don't really understand why we're in that role and what happened to the person who was my spouse, who was my friend. Where did they go? My child, because we're playing a different role and we don't even know we're doing that. We think we're doing the role as that person, but we've really allowed the disease many times to strip that away from us. And so it's really important for us to understand kind of the base of our relationships. We have to also look at different things in terms of how do we bring joy to ourselves and to the person we're caring for. A lot of times we focus on what we have to do for them, but we have to start working on what do we do together? What brings our relationship back? Because when we're in a relationship, we can get much more done than when we're at odds with one another because we're blocking things. We also have to really understand like activities. Why is somebody pulling away? They can use the excuse that they can't hear. They can use the excuse that they can't see. But you know what? Blind and deaf people participate in activities all the time. So how do we pull them back into the loop? What is going to make that joy? What is going to make that connection? What is going to make safety for both of you, not just them? Dancing is a really good way to do that. I had one couple who, they struggled. One was blind, one had dementia, but every morning, I love this story, every morning when they get out of bed, they dance, and every night before they go to bed, they dance. Because it gives them, as we age, a lot of times we don't touch as much. We don't have that tactile, and I hear that from spouses all the time. I miss that touch. There's ways to incorporate that and still be able to maintain that. It might look different than what you were used to, but it will still penetrate your heart. With my mom, we used to dance when she was able to stand, and then she, got to a wheelchair, and then I would dance with her in the wheelchair, and then that got too complicated. And then we did the arm dance. Then we got down to the pinky dance, But they were all very intimate moments. And so, you know, to me, one of the strategies to get over denial is, again, getting back into relationship, get back into meaning, and realize that things aren't always going to look like they once did. But they will be probably more powerful connections and ones that you will remember even deeper. I know we only have 5 minutes left. Anything that anyone wants to add in terms of kind of strategies for kind of overcoming denial and ways to maybe look at the world a little bit different?
I appreciate your comments. My whole career was in caregiving, and I couldn't get off that with my sister. And she's the older sister, but I was the one who knew everything, and I was trying to clarify for her hallucinations, that they weren't real and that she didn't need to be afraid of it. But as you said, I need to move into her reality. They are real to her.
Yep.
And so I've been able to do that more recently because I'm exhausted trying to talk her out of her reality. I can't keep trying that anymore. And also it gives her a chance to be right and to be a success in her own life.
Yep.
And also if I take her out to lunch, I'd always want to pay because she doesn't have a lot of money, and I figured she'd need her money for her care. Maybe that and more. And so now I start letting her, she wants to pay for lunch. She wants to treat me to lunch. She wants to be my older sister, and she wants to get her purse out and get her card out and buy me lunch, and she feels very good about that.
Oh,
so
that's beautiful.
Why can't I let her be a success that day and with that particular instance? So now, and after hearing your comments, whenever I can just let her feel like she's in control, let her feel that she's right, that she's a success. The last time I took her to the primary care physician, she listened to the doctor and I go on and on. And she said, you know, what if I'm right? And you're wrong, doctor, and you're wrong, Mary. What if she is right? I don't know, maybe she is here. These people that we're all thinking are hallucinations. So you're right, I have to let her fail. I have to let her learn her lessons. I have to let her be her own success. And I may be trying to do too much for her and not letting her feel like she's independently living her own life. So I think I have to just be more alert to that.
Oh, wonderful. Great summary. Great summary. Any other questions or comments? Amy?
You know, I know a couple, and the first time I met the wife, she said, I am no longer in denial. I'm no longer in denial, and it's really good. And I'm finally, you know, we're just done. We're done with all these appointments. We're done with trying to figure out what else it is. And I said, I'm really glad to hear that, because for the past 2 years, your only dates have been doctor's appointments. And so I'm excited for you to actually spend time together now, because this is a progressive disease, and you have to enjoy every moment that you have, because it's going to change. And then you have to find different moments to enjoy. But I like how you say if you get back to the relationship, then everything will be easy to accept, or easier.
Yeah, well, and you know, I know some people shoot me down for this, and that's their opinion, but there's a lot of people that don't go to the doctor after a point because they don't feel like they're getting any help to really live daily with things. And, you know, I'm a believer that you are in charge of your care and to be able to make your decisions, because to me, quality of life is everything. It might not be to someone else here or someone else listening. That is fine. But there are I will give you permission that if you're at that point, you know, and then you'll pop back in if something comes back up. But people are like, why am I doing all this scanning? What am I doing? Is this really being used, you know, for research? That might be really important to you and you want to do that. But there's questions, is it really being used for that in a lot of these scenarios? And, you know, do you feel the medications are helping or not? Those are important questions to ask. But I think it's a mistake for us to give our lives over to a disease. I think it takes both of us down and all of us in the family down much faster when we give up our hope that there's still a lot of joy to be had. So, well, thank you very much. I do want to mention that, let's see, there's going to be, oh, my glasses are all sweaty here. There's another program coming up on October 8th, working together with your memory care staff. And I'm not sure who's doing that. Is that Amy? That is Amy, so that'll be wonderful. Any other questions? I'll stick around. I know if you haven't stopped in and grabbed, there's tons of resource information on the table over here and back there. I also wanted to mention, I'm going to pick a number between 1 and 25. I do have a gift that I'll give out to somebody here. It's called a twiddle, and I don't have it with me. I apologize. It didn't come in the mail yet. But twiddle is kind of an anxiety reliever. It's a muff that has all kinds of gadgets to work with. And I'd be more than glad to give that to the winner. So I am going to just pick a number, and I am going to ask people to just state a number, and we'll see who gets closest. Let's say between 1 and 50. We'll do that, and I will. You want to pick a number? Mm-hmm.
8. Do I want to?
8. We're going to go around, and I'll have everybody else. Okay, so 8. You want to go? You want to pick a number between 1 and 10? Okay.
48.
48, okay.
37.
37, okay. 7. Okay.
22.
22. Okay. Do you want to pick a number?
Pick a number between 1 and 50.
4? Okay. No thanks? Okay. Back in the corner?
Is 27 said?
Nope. Okay.
25.
Oh, 20 what?
25.
25? Okay. 26.
41.
41.
27.
27's been had.
Okay, 3.
3?
30.
30, okay.
38.
38, okay. 15, okay, and who is closest here? It's looking like number 27.
Yay.
Okay, so I'll get your, if you want to come up and give me your address, I'll get that mailed out to you. Sarah or Amy, is there anything you guys wanted to say in ramping up at all?
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you guys.